Good evening, everybody. We are going to start today's program now. It will be one of the best programs, hopefully, of the library subcommittee. We have Joy Bimal with us today. I'll just give a brief introduction of Joy, although everybody knows about him. He is the only son of Bimal Roy and was a topper in English at the Bombay Scottish School. He was raised on books written by British authors like Enid Blyton, Agatha Christie and P.G. Wodehouse. So if you go through his book, you will detect a Woodhouseian influence in his written works. A man of many talents, Joy has not followed a traditional career path. He was an assistant to film director Shyam Benegal and directed 2 documentaries. Remembering Bimal Roy and On the Threshold, which delved into the world of mentally challenged children, are 2 of his documentaries. He worked briefly in the music industry as an executive with HMV before pursuing his penchant for design, creating beautiful homes, dream weddings and elegant clothing. His recent work being Touch of Joy, a sari upcycling initiative for social cause. A resident of Bombay, but a true Bengali at heart, Joy is an observer of the world which he so naturally translates into his narrations in Ramblings of a Bandra Boy, his book. A delightful compilation of episodes from his daily life, both recent and past. Each incident is a vivid description of an everyday event that blends the extraordinary and the mundane in a manner that entertains. Joy brings to life a cast of characters from celebrities to household staff, who scheme and hatch plots trying to present a particular version of themselves to the world, but eventually revealing their true natures. The book promises to amuse you with its moments of happiness and causes you to reflect about life through narratives of despair. There is a streak of sadness too in the stories, as Joy recalls his childhood and his love for his mother and the house in which he and his siblings had a joyful childhood. As an insider in the film industry, Joy has witnessed and interacted with many legends of the film world. He recounts stories using discrete codes, and it is fun to puzzle out who some of the key figures are. That's a challenge. Ramblings of a Bandra Boy is Joy's Kheror Khata, that red book that we all know about, a traditional cloth-bound notebook which Ray used quite frequently, with notes on a segment of India's upper middle class society. It should be an interesting read for all those who are fond of films, commercial or otherwise. Bimal Roy, a few words about Bimal Roy. He was born on 12th of July 1909 in undivided Bengal, East Bengal in those days. He passed away, he died of cancer at the age of 56 on 7th January 1966, unfortunately. I would say at the peak of his career. He is known for his realistic and socialistic films. In those days, we know that just after and before Ray, many people were influenced by the Italian neorealistic cinema such as Bicycle Thief by Vittorio De Sica. And some of his films, my favorite films are Do Bigha Zameen, Devdas, Madhumati, Sujata, Bandini and Kabuliwala. He received 11 Filmfare Awards in his short career and 2 national awards. He also received an international prize at Cannes Film Festival for Bandini, which was a brilliant film. We have tried to show you Bandini here in a few days' time. Madhumati had won 9 Filmfare Awards in 1958, which was a record unparalleled for 47 years. His team included Rishikesh Mukherjee, who was his editor, Govindu Ghosh, his screenwriter, Ashit Sen, his assistant director, and Sholil Chaudhary and S.D. Burman, obviously as music directors. He was a member of the jury at first Moscow International Film Festival in 1959. K. A. Abbas, the renowned filmmaker, had this to say about Bimal Roy, that he was Bengal's gift to Bombay. The film which left a permanent impact on Indian cinema was Do Bigha Zameen, Balraj Sahni's brilliant film. Satyajit Ray had very interesting things to say about Bimal Roy. He said that with his very first film, Udayer Pothe, which was Hamrahi in Hindi, Bimal Roy was able to sweep aside the cobwebs of the old tradition and introduce a realism and subtlety that was wholly suited to cinema. He was undoubtedly a pioneer and reached his peak with a film that still reverberates in the minds of those who saw it. I refer to Do Bigha Zameen, which remains one of the landmarks of Indian cinema. Now I'll briefly introduce the other participants of today's discussion. We are already joined by Anik Dutta, the celebrated filmmaker. He doesn't require any introduction, but anyway, I'll just tell you a few things about him. He happens to be Joy's nephew, his Jathamashai's grandson, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. He's a renowned filmmaker, and people are familiar with Bhute Bhavishwat and Aparajito, which is well known to all of us. We are also honored to have Mir Afsar Ali, Mir to all of us, a popular actor, radio and television anchor, food expert and media personality who will lend his voice to readings from the book. And of course we have our own Anjum Katia, writer, editor, translator and moderator. She will moderate. Anjum is also the director of APJ Kolkata Lit Fest. We will start the program by releasing the book, so I will request Joy and Anik. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Not too well, but since it was Joy Mamu's book launch, I had to come. There was this character called Tenida in Bengali children's literature who would come up with every story was what we in Bangla call ghoul, which is cock and bull stories. And it involved a mama. So he was once asked by his sidekick that how many mamas do you have? So he had said, oh, they are like recurring decimals. So I also have a huge number of mamas, all of them wonderful people, and Joy Mamu is, of course, one of the favorites. Like Bombay was magical, number 5 Mamu wrote, and then number 6, which has been beautifully done up, almost created by Joy Mamu himself. And amongst Bombay, a kind of peace haven. And Joy Mamu was an enigma. My mother would say he is like Devshishu, which translated means the child of God. Apart from that, God or whoever had given him, but he was truly multi-talented. I remember when we would go there, he would play the piano, he would sing from English songs to Hindustani bhajans. I think you trained yourself for a little while in that. And he would paint. He was extremely creative. He would do all kinds of things, crafts, etc. I remember a portrait of Mother Mary in the living room, which he had, made out of, I think, pasteboards or something, which looked like a mosaic drawing, and so on and so forth. And then he joined Chambenegal for a while as an assistant. But the problem was that Joy Mamu would never, take it to a certain finality or monetize his abilities. or at least do something finally. He did 2 documentaries. So finally, when he started writing this post, the other gift he had amongst his various other talents was his sense of humor. Like, it could be very cryptic and very sarcastic and yet delightful. And sometimes on very inane subjects, like there was a cook called Jagannath in their household who was, he named Jay. So Jay became famous. And there were all kinds of things. There were filmmakers who were not named, some of them who were named, and of course cats and dogs, which absolutely, there are, I don't know how many at that point of time. When we used to go earlier, there were cats and dogs and even a crow. It's called Kaga. Yeah, so it's quite a madhouse. And so we all started telling him, this time it's easy. You have to put this in the form of a book and it'll stay. And not only me, a whole lot of others started telling him, and I'm very, very happy that finally it has happened. And I have the privilege of launching it in Calcutta. So, thank you, Joy Mamu. I'm proud of it.
So, a lot of the book is about his memories of this beautiful bungalow which Anik just mentioned, 5 Mount Mary Road, right? Godiwala Bungalow, and a sense of nostalgia and loss at the passing of that bungalow. Literally, it's now been torn down. And I came across this film, he mentioned it, and I had a look at it, and a very, very evocative and charming film made by Nasreen Munni Kabir, who's a well-known film writer. And it's kind of looks at the bungalow when the family was still living there, obviously after Bimal Roy had passed away. So the film is called Bimal Roy Does Not Live Here Anymore. But it takes us through. So we thought, the rooms and the people and the memories. So I just thought we'd start with that film today and then lead into the rest of the discussion and the readings. So that's the film we're going to see. Thank you.
टूटे हुए ख्वाबों ने हमको ये सिखाया है, दिल ने जिसे पाया था आँखों ने गंवाया है, टूटे हुए ख्वाबों ने।
My room is looking a little jaundiced right now. Everything's in yellow. But anyway, by the way, the yellow's a gift. The color scheme is more my sister's than mine. There's a ceremony, Tatu. There's a ceremony called Bhai Phota, which is basically Bhau Bij. And all this was her gift to me. The bed cover and the cushions and that and the rug there and the cushion. So
It is so beautiful.
that chair was on top of a garage loft, and I found it, and it had one handle missing and various other pieces missing, and even the back piece was missing. So I got a carpenter to put all that at home, and I restored it. There was no cane. I got all that done.
I know it's going to be dark in the corner, but I'd like you to show us Moni Baba's picture, because
Sure.
whichever room you're in, you always have a picture of him.
That's right. This is my personal shrine, where I offer flowers every day.
Please show us the other picture of Ma and Moni Baba as
Oh
well.
yes, it's a beautiful photograph. Can you see this?
Can we
Maybe
put
put
it
it under the
inside?
light, yeah? And there's my mother in a similar sari right there. So maybe Ma, you can come here. Come here and show us your picture with Moni Baba and tell us when it was shot. Do you remember this picture? Yeah?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Where was this taken, Mom?
Jane.
Again. In which year?
Jane, Baba is standing there. No, don't take me. Hey.
Well, Ma says her room is terribly messy, but I still think we should go for it. My mother's room is apparently not in a good condition, my mother says, but this is just for our record, so that whenever it is, we look at this many years from now, we'll remember what it looks like. That was a picture taken by my mother of my sister Boboni with her son. And she made it look like the Madonna and Child. And that's a photograph of my father taken by my mother when he was much younger. That's her personal shrine. So shall we see my sister's room?
Yes.
She's going to hate all of us for the rest of our lives. Anyway, who cares? She's very neat. But she should be here in this room. But you saw her at the... Luckily you saw her in the picture. So...
We're hearing loud and clear?
And this is the dining room. And that's our dog Patch, who's injured right now. And this is where we sit and eat. And there's a haunted well at the back, which of course you won't be able to see from here. And that very embarrassingly bad kitchen, but anyway, for the record. The mirror was picked up by my sister somewhere in Chor Bazaar, and the rest of the stuff, all this furniture, this was also picked up from various flea markets all over Bombay at the princely sum of, like things like $200. Times have changed.
Have you always used this as a dining room?
Always, from the time of my father. In fact, those are the only memories, sitting at a meal time, and we had a cook called Alfred, I think. This is our shrine. That's a picture of Baba, one in the center, above the Devi, that's the goddess. You heard about 33 crore gods and goddesses, so we have a fair representation in our puja room.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Okay. So now which room would you like?
So I think we should just get into the living room. There are these nasty builders who are trying to break this place down, and they're at the moment keeping tabs, so we're all very stressed here. This is of course the living room, and I leave you to shoot it as you please. That photograph there of my father was taken by my mother. This was on one of his last trips to Mahabaleshwar on the road. And if you see it carefully, you'll realize that her shadow is on the photograph. So in a way, it's a very symbolic kind of photograph. I wouldn't really like to say anything about any individual piece in the room. I think basically we've kind of tried to make the room be cohesive. So things were added on one at a time. This is called a chaperone seat. Somebody sits there and spoils basically the love happening. Yeah? Or else it could be called a kebab mein haddi seat. I prefer that more like a name. Anyway.
Tell me what you want to ask.
What is your feeling, the strongest feeling about this house for you?
I don't want to be broken down. That's one thing I never wanted. The house doesn't belong to us, but I have lived here in 45 years. More than half my life. Otherwise I would have been 90 today, but anyway I'm not yet. The point is it's a very painful thing to think about. We tried our development and then it was listed on the Heritage Act, Heritage Property. They deleted that from the government gazette. So one doesn't feel nice about it. It's not, I think it's very unjust.
This is just such a lovely place, and it will always stay in so many people's hearts.
Yes. It's full of nostalgia already. Even before it's gone, people have a sense of nostalgia.
Tell me, Ma,
Hmm?
you've taken so many pictures of this house.
Yeah.
What time do you think is the best time to photograph this house as far as light is concerned?
Like that, that depends on what the subject is, where you want to take. Whether in this room, then morning is the best. Afternoon, this part is better. If light comes on this side.
It's a very active house because all of you are very active and each one seems to be doing their own thing. There's a lot of action going on.
On the contrary, people keep saying it's so laid back. Everyone who can't sleep, maybe Damien should come here and sleep. He says he can't sleep. The minute people come here, they fall asleep apparently. Except that we can't sleep. That's true. But it's a sleepy household. You come at any time of the point in day, it seems like the same time. Time is static, day in, day out. In the morning, what are we going to eat for breakfast? Then at the breakfast table, what are you going to eat for lunch? Lunchtime, what are you going to eat for dinner? Mercifully, tea has become less,
What I used to love about the place in the evening, sometimes when Mom would light the lubhan, and also that she would ring the bell, no?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
All gone. You need servants. No, you have to bully somebody into getting the loban and then getting it, going through the house. You don't get those kind of people anymore.
And it's an impossible question because there's so many memories, but anything in this house that you never ever forget?
No, I just think the house itself. Somehow, the whole thing, as I said, coheses. It's not like any individual thing in the house. It's the house as a whole. I think it's almost, I always feel that it's got its own entity. It's almost got, its own, it's almost as if the house has more of a personality than any of us. It's amazing. We kind of blended in with the house in many ways, and that's why sometimes I feel anachronistic because I feel as if I belong to another time. Maybe it's the house that's doing it to us.
I must say that whenever I come to India and Bombay, this place, if I don't see this place and see you and see Joy and Tatu, I feel like I'm not in India.
I won't be here long, not very long anyway, but I hope you come again and again. You're part of the family.
This house, the tenancy deed dates back to April 1954. And I was born in January 1955. So that's almost exactly the time that it was my mother's pregnancy. So I keep feeling that I like to think that I was conceived here. I like to think that I belong. And I do feel I belong not only to this house, it's a very strange sense of belonging, in fact, to the area. Whenever I go to the church, for example, there's such a strong sense of belonging. It's almost as though I'm part of it,
हम ढूंढते हैं उनको जो मिल के नहीं मिलते रूठे हैं न जाने क्यों मेहमान वो मेरे दिल के मेहमान वो मेरे दिल के टूटे हुए ख्वाबों ने हमको ये सिखाया है
मुझे याद आ रहा है साफ साफ याद आ रहा है
क्या अपनी तमन्ना थी क्या सामने आया है दिल ने जिसे पाया था आँखों ने गंवाया है टूटे हुए ख्वाबों ने हमको ये सिखाया है दिल ने जिसे पाया था आँखों ने गंवाया है टूटे हुए ख्वाबों ने
So that film leaves a kind of pervasive sense of nostalgia and sadness and loss. But I assure you that this book is an absolute wacky roller coaster ride. I use the word wacky because the sense of humor which you saw glimpses of in the film, Joy can't help himself. So he always comes up with these sarcastic one-liners. But the stories in the book, it's really a kind of almost like a daily sip of something along with your morning coffee or tea. There's a sense of just rambling through and dipping in at random and picking up little nuggets and interesting little things. So there are many different kinds of stories, and we're really looking forward to me reading some of them. He's selected some of the crazier ones, I think, to read. So which one would you like to start with, Neil?
We were talking about, good evening everyone, ladies and gentlemen. We were talking about a certain J, Jagannath. There's a certain J and a Riyaz Bhai. So I'll probably start with Riyaz Bhai. I've done a little bit of Riyaz with the writer, as in a rehearsal.
You want to say something before he starts?
There's just one thing which I'd like from Joyda as permission. There are some words which have been used with asterisk. So you want me to read the words as they are? Okay, great, excellent. Okay, right, so it's in pursuit of happiness or looking for Riyaz Bhai. Joyda wrote, a few weeks ago, my school classmate M and I drove down to Mahabaleshwar for a class reunion in the club. An old college friend who now lives en route to Mahabaleshwar has been entreating me to visit him for several years. So I told M I would like to drop in to see him for a short while. M is very laid back and easygoing and agreed without demur. Much to the displeasure of my family and friends, I have started smoking again after a hiatus of 32 years. We smokers are now treated like social pariahs, so I was overjoyed to find an ashtray full of cigarette butts on his veranda. As I lit up, my friend casually asked if I would like something stronger. Some of my less reputable friends have been urging me to switch to weed as it is considered to be beneficial, but somehow I hadn't had the opportunity of smoking it so far, so I agreed with alacrity, much to the horror of M. My friend said his son was the best one to do the honors and bellowed, "Chotu!" A strapping 6-foot young man with a delectable afro emerged from inside. He was 2 feet high when I last saw him, so naturally I was caught by surprise. I watched in fascination as Chotu deftly and expertly rolled a joint under the watchful eye of his parents. Then we passed it around, taking puffs in amiable silence, with the exception of M, who looked like he was ready to burst an artery. I began to waft into a better space and decided I had to have some for myself. Chotu helpfully offered me seeds of the plant. It grew in their backyard, but his father said that that wasn't a good idea at all. Instead, Chotu would tell me where to get it in Mahabaleshwar. He said I should ask for Riyaz Bhai and tell him the young man with the afro had sent me, but I should be very discreet, in brackets, ha, and ask, kuch hai? He then gave me directions. Go to the main circle, take the first left into a very narrow lane, look for a very shady staircase and ask for Riyaz Bhai. Brimming with enthusiasm, I reached Mahabaleshwar, and the first thing M did was to spill the beans to the rest of the group. Their faces were a study in horror and disbelief. I was told in no uncertain terms that I should desist because no one was going to bail me out if I was put into a lockup. So much for loyalty. So off I went alone in my pursuit of happiness. I reached to the main circle and took the first gully on the left, but it didn't seem to have any shady stairways. I asked a shopkeeper, "It's your line. Idhar koi Riyaz Bhai hai?"
Don't make me do this.
Okay, "Idhar koi Riyaz Bhai hai?" He looked at me quizzically and said, "Idhar to bahut sare Riyaz Bhai hai." वो क्या करता है? This was the one question I could not answer. I was on the verge of backing off when a bystander who had overheard us asked me helpfully, "क्या tailor है?" I said no. But this guy would not give up. लगता है आप अमन होटल वाले रियाज भाई को ढूंढ रहे हैं. चलिए मैं लेकर चलता हूँ. I was propelled towards a joint that looked shady enough to qualify. There was a decrepit waiter sitting at the counter. I asked him if he was Riaz Bhai. He said, "Nahi andar hai, bulata hu, baithiye." There were no other customers. I became the uncomfortable focus of attention of the listless waiters hovering in the background. I began to feel like E.T. Finally, one of them sidled up and offered me tea. By this time, I was in need of something far stronger, but I settled for tea. One of my friends called and asked if I was already in the lockup. I ignored the jibe and said I had hit bullseye and would be with them shortly. Then Riaz Bhai emerged. I told him that the young man with an afro, this being done Damsharad style, had sent me. He gave me a basilisk stare and asked, "For what?" I threw caution to the winds and did a Damsharad puffing number. His brow cleared. Acha, hookah, first floor. In desperation, I called Chotu and put Riaz Bhai on the line. After a brief conversation, he disconnected, gave me a knowing smirk, and told me the person I was looking for was Riaz Memon and gave me directions. It was only then that I came to know there is another circle in Mahabaleshwar. I could have strangled Chotu. So off I went and came to what I thought was the journey's end, a piddly little hole in the corner, photocopy cum mobile accessory shop in a narrow gully. But there was still no sign of any shady steps. A handsome young man was behind the counter, busy with two loutish characters whose phones were being fixed. I waited impatiently for them to leave and then asked the fellow if he was Riaz Memon. He said he was the son and asked, "Kya kaam hai?" I was a bit unnerved by now, so I said cautiously, "Do you know a young man with an afro?" In Damsharad mode. He gave me a lopsided leer. "Maal chahiye na? Ab dhanda band kar diya." I could have wept with frustration. By this time, a toothless man had materialized behind me. "Aapko Riyaz dange chahiye?" I wondered how many more Riaz Bhais I would have to tackle before I hit pay dirt. But they say, third time, lucky. The third Riaz Bhai was a cheery man who gave me a toothy grin and before I could open my mouth, asked me, "Maal chahiye?" So much for discretion. It was then that I noticed there was a narrow staircase beside his shop which he ascended to get me my elusive treasure. It was shadowy, but not shady. But I was so elated that I was willing to overlook my trials and misadventures, and I returned triumphantly to the club, holding up my hard-earned trophy.
Yeah, quite an adventure that was. Yeah. Was that the best adventure you've had in search of happiness, or was there anything else?
I just had to drive 50 euros to...
Just a minute. Give him
Can we have another microphone, please?
I just had to... Hello?
Yes, it was reserved for Riaz Bhai. Now it's yours.
Yeah, so adventures keep happening to me. Somebody said that I attract drama apparently. So I just went to Morocco, and when I handed over my visa, there was this fat fellow who kind of was leering at me, and he says, "So you're from India, Amitabh Bachchan?" You know? And I said, "Well," anyway, then his attention went to the visa, and at the bottom there was one line about insurance vector. So he said, "Where's your insurance?" And I realized I didn't have insurance. So he said, "You are my bade bhaiya. I will help you." Then he folded the visa into half and slipped it back at me. And he said, "Put your thank you into this." So I looked at him, then I realized that the only notes I had were 50 euros. So he got lucky. I gave him 50 euro. He didn't see it. I put it and gave. Then he looked at it carefully and he said, he looked a little he looked baffled. And he said, "Are you sure you're giving this from your heart?" I felt like giving him one whack, you know. So I debated what I should say, yes or no. When I realized if I wanted to enter Morocco, I had to say yes. So that's how I got into Morocco.
Yet another adventure. Yeah, but at least you ended with happiness there too.
Yes.
You got into Morocco, right? Yeah. Maybe just hold on.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. So as just to give you an example from what is read, this book is full of these sort of strange encounters, little observations, studies of human character, and very much more about human behavior, how people behave. So do you want to read another piece? You had, which one were you thinking of after this? After The Pursuit of Happiness? So Going Crazy. So there are so many different things, you know, you've read, he told us a little bit about Joy's life and how he's done all these various things. One of them, of course, is working on film sets, because he was working with Shyam Benegal, and so he was on the shoot of Trikal. Trikal was being shot in Goa, and the whole team, the whole crew and the cast was staying together on location, and Joy was there, and of course, you know where he is, drama has to follow. So there was lots of excitement happening off the screen in during shooting of Trikal. So Mir is going to share some of that with us.
Going Crazy. Joyda writes, Trikal, my second film assisting filmmaker Shyam Benegal, was a roller coaster ride. It was set in Goa, in a sleepy little village called Lutulim, shot almost entirely inside a grand mansion dating back 300 years, the amazing home of cartoonist Mario Miranda. It had two vast and ornate ballrooms and an exquisite wooden chapel. The film was set during the time of the liberation in 1961, so the characters were all dressed in beautiful dresses, suits, and hats, transporting us into a bygone era. During the shooting of Trikal, I became convinced that there was something in the air of Goa which dramatically increased one's libido and thirst for alcohol. Consequently, the off-screen liaisons were far more interesting than the ones on screen, and almost all the actors would get drunk during the shoot. There was a small bar conveniently situated just outside the gate of the villa, and beer was 6 rupees a bottle. It was an irresistible combination, so if any actor was not to be found in the villa when required for a shot, I knew exactly where to find him. It was quite clear from day one that everyone was on the make, so it was no surprise to anyone when an actor and an actress, both married but not to each other, were seen holding hands and exchanging amorous glances. But it was certainly a surprise when the two of them sauntered up to me one evening and coolly proposed a ménage à trois. I wish I hadn't refused, because no one has made the offer again. In the meantime, my roomie, a young actor, started a dalliance with a much older actress known for her expertise in seduction and the ways of love. Finally, I had to exchange places with the actress one night as my roomie's request to facilitate their amorous pursuits. But I hadn't reckoned on being propositioned by the actress's roomie, so I spent most of the night sleepless and cowering under the covers. But that wasn't all. I had more excitement lined up for me. One evening, my roomie and I were unwinding after a hard day's work when there was a knock on the door. My roomie opened the door and a singer-actress pushed past him, made a beeline for my bed, lay down and wrapped herself around me. My roomie stifled a laugh but walked out discreetly, leaving me alone to fend for myself against this man-eater. I extricated myself with difficulty. She was furious and stormed out, cursing me, but it didn't take her long to recover. I found her making out with a Goan singer at the back of the costume room the very next day. The elderly leading lady's poet husband arrived on a visit soon after. Mercifully, he didn't recite his poetry, but instead, he drank himself into a stupor every night and had to be carried back to his room. His wife would burst into tears at the sight, and we would be terribly embarrassed but pretend not to notice and beat a hasty retreat. We all heaved a collective sigh of relief when he left. It was chaotic being on location because I had to do the work of 3 people. One of my co-assistants was a senior crew member's wife who came on board just on a whim. Sham gave her the job of the dialogue assistant for the experience, which meant she had to keep check that the actors were following their lines correctly. Only when the dialogues began going all over the place did we discover she was deaf. So I had to take over her job. Unfortunately, I had to take on the job of the other co-assistant too. He was the young nephew of an internationally acclaimed filmmaker. All the equipment had been hired from his uncle's firm, so the technicians were his bum chums. When he wasn't shooting the breeze with them, he was climbing trees, which seemed to be a passion with him, that didn't leave him much time to be on the set. As a result, I was a nervous wreck by the time the shoot got over. The script of Trikal was non-linear, so much so that one could interpose scenes without making any difference to the elliptical narrative, which also shifted backwards and forwards in time. It was not the easiest of scripts to follow, but I only realized how difficult it was midway through the shooting schedule when I went into a room during the lunch break to ready it for the next shot and found the cameraman lying on the bed with his hat over his face. He was a colorful character straight out of a western because he always wore a Stetson hat and cowboy boots. He reacted to the sound of my entrance, removed the hat, and looked at me purposefully. Without any preamble, he patted the bed next to him and said, "Sit down." I sat down nervously, wondering what would happen next. There was a pregnant pause, and then he said, "Now tell me the story of the film." He was deeply offended because I giggled helplessly. I explained to him that there wasn't really a story, it was a series of events strung together, so it was difficult to follow. I left him looking even more confused than before. We ended on a high note because we shifted out of the crummy hotel we had been holed up in for 7 weeks and spent the last few days in the lap of luxury at the yet-to-open 5-star Majorda Beach Resort. Apparently, they made Sham an offer he couldn't refuse. I promptly invited my mother to visit and she came down bringing my 2 nieces, Mishka aged 9 and Anvesha aged 11, and my nephew Nikhilesh aged 5. They splashed happily in the pool during the day and danced with me to Stevie Wonder's song Part-Time Lover at Night, which was quite unforgettable. So many other memories flash by as I write this, but there are too many to tell, and I have said, or rather written, too much already. There's something which I wanted to add to this. This is a little out of the script, yeah. There was a very young actor in this film who later on evolved into a very well-known singer. Could anyone give me his or her name? A very talented... Right. So I just needed one. So Lucky Ali, Aniruddha right out there, of course, the trivia man would get that. Remo, Lucky Ali, there were so many. So yeah, that was it.
So did you have any stories about Lucky Ali from that shoot that you can add?
No, he was the actor.
Good.
When he was
The mic, please.
he was a co-assistant with me on the next film I worked on, Susman. And he was probably Riaz Bhai's best client. Like he was always spaced out. So I had to do all his work, of course.
Mahmood sir.
Yeah,
Mahmood Maqsood Ali.
But he's a dear friend.
Right. So one of the things that we have heard in this book is sort of peppered with little observations and stories about some of the famous actors and actresses who we all know from the silver screen. Do you want to share any one particular memory or anecdote with us? I know they're all in the book, but since we're not going to get that much of a chance, no, you can't think of any. Okay, because I remember there's one about Rekha, which I think you're going to read, and there's one about going to a gym. That was the one I was hoping he was going to share with us, but he's being very reticent. Going to a gym and watching some of the young up-and-coming male actors strutting their stuff in the gym and what that was like to the observer. And, not young, he says, not young. Maybe if I carry on, he'll carry on giving us some more details.
Old enough to know better, basically.
Yeah. So, would you like to read the, yeah.
Right, so this piece is titled Rekha Ko Dekha. Rekha Ko Dekha. Soon after we moved from Godiwala Bungalow to the cottage beside it, my friend Nasreen Munni Kabir and her then partner Peter Chappell visited India. Peter, a professional photographer and cameraman, fell in love with our cottage and insisted on taking photos of it and of my sister Yashodhara and me as well. But he added apologetically that the only time he could manage for the photo session was at 8 a.m. on the morning of his departure. I'm not a morning person, but somehow I managed to get ready by 8 a.m. that day. Then I opened the front door and stood there waiting expectantly to greet Peter. The gate swung open, but instead of Peter, a woman with a fabulous figure dressed in lycra bicycling shorts and t-shirt wandered in and stood there looking at the cottage and me. The gate was some distance from the house, so I ventured forth tentatively to ask what she wanted. She promptly started walking towards me, and as she approached, I realized she was the one and only Rekha, sultry siren of the silver screen. I gathered my wits and said, "You worked on a film made by my brother-in-law Basu Bhattacharya?" She looked speculatively at me and in a deep, husky voice said, "No way." Then a thought struck her and she said, "That means you are Bimal Das?" And her voice trailed off with a question mark. So I filled in the blank saying, "Son." Again her response was, "No way." I couldn't think of anything else to say after that. But she continued to stand there, gazing at the house over my shoulder. So I asked her, "Would you like to come in?" She promptly said, "I would love to." I think she was waiting to be asked. I ushered her inside and she stood stock still in the middle of the living room while her eyes roved all around the room, taking in every detail, and then came to a standstill on me. She breathed, "I love your home. It's so..." And then she paused dramatically. I waited expectantly for her to complete the sentence. She continued, "So me." I was very thrilled by her reaction, and suddenly I heard myself saying, "Would you like to see my bathroom?" In brackets, actually, I had just completed my bathroom and I was very proud of the results. One wall was sheer glass overlooking my terrace and trees as far as the eyes could see. The tiles were cerulean blue and handmade by a potter, and so was the wash basin. The minute I said, "Would you like to see my bathroom?" I cringed with embarrassment and wondered what she was thinking. But she surprised me by saying, "I would love to." She gushed briefly over the bathroom when I suddenly remembered that my niece Mishka was asleep in the loft above my room, and we may have woken her up with our conversation. I told Rekha in a whisper that we had better return to the living room because my niece Mishka was asleep upstairs. Rekha stopped in her tracks, clutched her heart and said huskily, "Mishka? Oh, I love Mishka. I want to meet her." To say I was taken aback was putting it mildly. How on earth did Rekha know Mishka? Still reeling under Rekha's magic spell, I climbed the narrow stairs to the loft and shook Mishka urgently. "Come on downstairs, someone wants to meet you." Mishka grunted and got up in slow motion and walked down like a zombie with her long hair covering her face. I couldn't see her expression when Rekha gushed and cooed all over her, but I did after Rekha left. She was furious. "You should have warned me, Joy Mamu. I haven't brushed my teeth nor my hair. I look like something the cat brought in." No amount of appeasing would mollify her. She never forgave me, and Rekha never visited again. There's a footnote. My brother-in-law Basu Bhattacharya shot almost his entire film starring Om Puri and Rekha in his apartment in Gold Mist. Mishka used to spend a lot of time there playing with Mamma, that's Basu's granddaughter. Sorry, my apologies, Basu's daughter. They were around 9 and 11 respectively at the time, and that's how Rekha knew Mishka.
Right, so that was Rekha for Rekha. We're going to come draw this session to a close. I was hoping Joy would be more chatty and forthcoming. But you do? Yeah.
Jada, there is one thing that I read on Facebook, that's because I follow you on Facebook. I don't think that's here in the book. It's about the Madhumati and Om Shanti Om connection and you meeting SRK on the lawns of Mannat. Yeah,
we must hear
We must hear that.
Come on,
Shah Rukh Khan fans in the house? Can we see Shah Rukh Khan fans in the house? Lady at the back? Shah Rukh Khan fans? Okay. That's one incident which I know of. I don't think that's in the book.
No, it's not.
No, it's not in the book. So, yeah, you're going to listen to this one.
Thank you, Anik. Bye-bye.
Anik, thank you so much. Take care.
I don't know where to begin actually. It's a long story. Yeah. Okay, so I never wanted to make a film. But suddenly there was this desire to, people had, Mughal Azam had been colorized and had done very well, and there were lots of people who were offering or rather wanting to colorize Madhumati. So I said, over my dead body, we're not going to colorize the film. But it suddenly occurred to me that maybe I could make a sequel to it and I would produce it. I didn't know who directed, but I thought of Amir Khan because Amir Khan was in class with my nephew and calls me Joy Mamu. So I felt he'd be someone I could easily get. Anyway, of course, to make a film you need money, which I didn't have. So then I thought of all the people I knew who had money, and I singled in on a guy called Manmohan Shetty who owned Ad Labs, and he was like Mr. Moneybags basically. Anyway, he is very man with round gooseberry eyes, and he kept staring at me, and he finally said, "No Amir Khan, no sequel. You may do a remake, get Shah Rukh Khan, I will fund the money." So I was like, get Shah Rukh Khan? I mean, how? Anyway, then, so I have this friend called Behroz Gandhi. Father Keku was one of the foremost well-known art impresarios of India. And they live in a very beautiful old house called Keki Manzil, and Shah Rukh has bought the house next to them. So Keku was a kind of good Samaritan and basically, help people. So at that point in time, Shah Rukh had flaunted all bylaws, municipal bylaws, and built a 4-story structure behind his heritage bungalow, and the residents were up in arms against him. So Keku facilitated a meeting with the residents, and it was, I think, on Independence Day. So Behroz said, here's your chance. You go in with them, and once they finish the meeting, tell him about Madhumati. So I kind of sneaked in with them, and I was waiting for my turn, and when finally I got a chance, I must say one thing, that Shah Rukh has an incredible quality of making you feel like you're the only person who exists, you know. When he talks to you, he looks at you and the whole world seems to recede, you know. He's got this, it's a very rare quality, I think. So he listened to me. I said, I want to make Madhumati and remake, and I'd like you to act in it. So what really surprised me was that he said, I don't do remakes. Now the fact is that I think just the year prior to that he had remade Devdas. So I couldn't figure out why he said I don't do remakes. Anyway, so that was line number one. And then he said, so I said, well, anyway, I'm giving you the DVD, see it. Maybe if you change your mind, you can. So he did change his mind, because he made a film called Om Shanti Om, which was a complete remake of Madhumati. So he did that on his own and made his money, and I gave him the idea. So I mean, like, no prizes for all books.
I just want to end this, open it out to, in case anybody wants to ask questions, by returning a little bit to the nostalgia mode. Because there's a lovely little anecdote here in this book about the house that they moved to after they moved out of Godiwala Bungalow, which we all saw on the screen. This was the cottage at 6 Mount Mary Road. And there's a lovely story about how they actually managed to acquire that cottage. So I'm just going to read that little bit. It's basically his mother who managed to make this happen, and we'll find out how. My father refused to buy the property. This was available, it was going. He said no, he won't buy it. His family had lost all their property under tragic circumstances in Bangladesh, and he was convinced that owning property brought misfortune. So my ingenious mother tricked him. She took my father's business manager, Amrit Shah, into confidence. She knew about Baba's complete unconcern about money and complete trust in Mr. Shah. So Baba signed the sale deed thinking it was a film contract. The property had to be mortgaged back to the landlords and the payment made over 3 years in installments. Baba signed the installment checks without looking at them. But the final installment was a large one. For the first time, he expressed mild interest. He asked Mr. Shah, what was it for? Now that the last check was signed, Mr. Shah felt it was the right time to inform Baba that he was the owner of a 1,500 square yard property in Bandra. But he had not bargained for Baba's reaction. Baba never raised his voice. The only way one could tell he was angry was when he turned red with rage. And that is what happened. But in addition, he threw his pen down and stalked silently out of the room. For 3 days, Baba refused to look at Mr. Shah or talk to him. In desperation, Mr. Shah finally went into his room and apologized. Baba looked at Mr. Shah and said, I don't make films to buy property. That's it, nothing more. So I just thought that was a lovely story. Says a lot about some of the films we've seen of Bimal Roy's and why he remains such a, sort of top favorite, even now, so many years later. So thank you very much. Oh, he wants to say something.
Not about myself, it's about my mother.
Yeah.
Because, you saw her, and you also may have noticed that she spoke about the light, about, where. So my mother and her twin are two of the earliest known women photographers of India. And we have been having exhibitions of their work. The Calcutta exhibition was at Jodunath, JBR MRC it's called. And it was ran for 2 months, but it's been showing its got such good response that it's gone to now 4 cities. And it's, I think, for me, it's a wonderful thing to happen because my mother, I would say, sacrificed a possible career because of the family. And she never ever spoke about it. I mean, she never even mentioned. I grew up thinking that all mothers took photos. I mean, like, you know, it was and 2 years after she died, somebody presented us a Bengali book called Chobitola, I think is the name. It was the history of photography, women photographers in India. The first time I realized that Ma was one of the earliest known women photographers. And so her fame is posthumous, I would say. But she's been able to step out from under her husband's shadow at last. And I think that's a wonderful thing to happen. So it's been, I think, I would say it's both a privilege and a burden to be the son of 2 such illustrious people. Expectations from me were really impossible, and I always felt I never measured up. And maybe this book is my way of also stepping away, because it's not all about my father, it's not all about my mother, it's about me. So it's like me finding myself, I'm 68, so like maybe better late than never.
We hope that there'll be more such writings. He writes on Facebook every day.
No, there's enough to publish Ramblings 2 and Ramblings 3, but I do not recommend writing a book or publishing it yourself. Never do it. It's been absolutely a nightmare. It's also pleasurable, like this experience is wonderful. But on the flip side, I've now landed up being an Amazon seller and packing books, you know, and sending them off. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, I can't see myself doing this permanently. So no Ramblings 2, no Ramblings 3 unless somebody undertakes.
Yeah, but with all due respect, Joy, not everybody who self-publishes ends up doing all this. I said not everybody who self-publishes ends up doing all this, you know, wrapping books and having your whole staff wrapping books on your dining table so that you can send them. There are more sane ways of doing it, but I don't expect you to have discovered that, right? Yes, okay. But would you like to ask a question, Parthuda, after listening?
I was wondering, is there anything which comes to your mind outside the book which you may want to share with us? Or just a personal question, who was the cinematographer of Bengali? Was it K.K. Mahajan?
Of which one?
The cinematographer that you talked about.
You want all the names of all the people? That's a clever way of starting with the cameraman. Yeah, Ashok. No, that's Ashok Mehta. Ashok Mehta.
Right. Yeah, no, we can go back and start looking back, checking who everybody.
Let's see if anyone guesses who was who. Yes. Correct. Yeah, Leela Naidu and Domores is quite because it's Ricardo.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anyone else? No, it was Remo.
Like we answered Mir.
Sorry?
He answered Mir about the young singer.
The singer?
Young singer.
Yeah, you said Alisha Chennai. Correct.
Anyway, before that. Anyway.
Okay.
It's so long ago now, it doesn't matter. I mean, like hell, I should have put it. I'm just very scared of being sued. And so I, in fact, discarded a lot of posts which were really quite, I think I would have probably been sued for defamation. So now, this book finally ended up being 440 pages long for the simple reason that there was no editor. And it's just, this is a crazy book. I mean, like, I don't know what to say. Finally, it's 130 GSM paper. This book weighs almost a kilo. Somebody said you can use it as a murder weapon. You know, apparently in Born Identity, somebody kills person with a book. So I mean, this is probably that book.
That's a new marketing ploy.
Oh, yeah.
You know, yeah. Grab your favorite murder weapon. Okay. Any more questions from the audience? Comments? Unearthing secrets?
There's one thing I'd like to add to this conversation. There are some very rare unseen pictures in this book which I haven't seen at many places. So it's a must read and must watch as well, because pictures are beautiful. These are pictures which you and I have not seen before. So grab it.
That's true. There's each chapter almost has some lovely shots and pictures.
Okay. So being a Bengali, of course, I'm a very good businessman. This book costs 1,000 rupees to print. I'm selling it for 500.
So it's unfortunately, despite his best efforts, we couldn't get the book here in time for today because he had to reprint. But they are going to be available from the Oxford bookstore in a couple of days' time. And I've asked him if he can do some signed versions, so those of you who missed out on getting it signed here may be able to pick up a signed copy at the Oxford bookstore. I hope that happens.
I hope so too.
Yeah? So shall we end today, unless you want to, maybe you wanted to add something?
Yes, no, I just asked Shrimati if you have something else.
But before I just, let me at least thank Parthadas, the library committee, Anjum Katyal, Mir, my absent nephew Anik, for making this evening happen. I am so grateful, I am delighted. And you know, this evening is completely random, like my book. In the sense, I was coming to Calcutta for a wedding, and I had 3 or 4 days gap in between doing nothing. So I just thought to myself, why not have a book launch? And it happened. So I mean, you know, this is the way things are happening, and that's organically happening, and I really am so grateful to the universe.
No, thanks to you. Thanks to everybody. Thanks Anjum, thanks Mir, and of course thanks to Anik, who's just left. Now I can ask Shrimati to hand over the bouquet and a small gift as a token of our appreciation. Thank you. Yes, of course.
Because everything was already said, there was nothing more to say.